I'm joined now by Michael, Fabricant Conservative MP and Boris Johnson supporter. Thanks very much for speaking to us today. The Conservative supporting newspapers even today are very critical, aren't they? Boris Johnson has survived, he won the vote, but, you know, descriptions like lamed up Prime Minister, dead man walking, fatally wounded, he's toast. You know, people assuming that it's a matter of when, not if, he goes before an election. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd say it sells newspapers, but I'm not sure it's necessarily the truth. First of all...
These are Conservative supporting newspapers even, Conservative supporting
Still sells newspapers, Geeta. But you know what? Boris is a very different sort of character from Theresa May and David Cameron and John... I voted against John Major, I voted against Ian Duncan Smith, and I would have voted against Theresa May had we got the actual vote, but by the time I put the letter in, she'd already resigned. I supported Boris because I think he is a winner. I think he's a very different sort of person. And, you know, I also don't like injustice. The acting commissioner of the Metropolitan Police had made it very clear that Boris Johnson was not a serial offender against COVID regulations. And yet we hear all the time from the Labour Party, obviously, the opposition that he was, when
well, he presided over
untrue.
A culture of mass
Yeah, and
fines.
that's his
but
nature,
is,
you know. In some ways, he's an ebullient, enthusiastic character, which is why I like him so much.
Well,
and you know what?
Even if he breaks the law and he says to MPs
no, that's not what I'm saying.
That he would do it all again.
Geeta, you've got to let me get a word in edgeways, because I know we've got a limited time, but if you don't let me get a word in edgeways, we'll never sort of say it. But it's his ebullient nature which got us Brexit, which got us the first vaccine and all the rest of it. I think so many others would have tried to do things but wouldn't have achieved. But the problem now, I think, for Boris, getting back to your original question, is where do we go from here? If there is a policy vacuum, if he thinks it's going to be life as before, well, there's going to be problems because people will fill that with argument and discontent, and maybe in a year's time or maybe sooner, because there's always talk of changing the rules of the 1922, another leadership battle. So Boris has got to move on from here.
What do you want him to do? What
I'd like him to do is rethink some of the policies. I think Rishi has got to accept that at the end of the day, it's the economy's stupid, as George Bush learned. You know, people have got to have pounds in their pocket, and even green policy.
What do you mean by that, though?
Well, it may mean tax cuts. It probably does mean tax cuts in various ways.
How do you pay for all the damage from COVID if you don't tax the population?
You know what? It's great for me because I'm a backbencher and I'm not the Chancellor of the Exchequer. But, you know, it's all very well. If we don't do something, then we'll be out of office.
I'm sure you've thought through a bit before you make demands like that, or requests like that even.
Well, I think some of the things we could be doing, for example, is we brought in green policies, you know, which I fully supported. But this was before we had COVID, before we had the war in Ukraine, which has battered economies across the world. You know, and battered people living here in the United Kingdom.
But how can Boris Johnson focus on any of this when he is fighting for his political survival weekly? And we know that there are the by-elections coming, there's the Privileges Committee coming. As you know, if you've got you know, potentially three-quarters of the backbench vote against you, that's really difficult for him to govern and to keep the party united, isn't it? But don't you just need a change and a clean start?
But you say, Geeta, you know, he's fighting. I would say the past tense. He fought. He won the battle last night, and providing he doesn't create a vacuum, providing he does bring in policy initiatives which are attractive to people. Don't interrupt, Geeta. I could see your lips were moving.
Okay.
Providing he fills this up with exciting policies, then actually I'm convinced we can move on from here. But it's up to Boris and it's up to the cabinet ministers to actually be dynamic on this.
How long do you think he's got, potentially? Some people are saying, you know, the autumn might prove very difficult with that Privileges Committee report coming out. And do you sense that your colleagues who've been attacking each other in public, Nadine Dorries and Jeremy Hunt, you know, she had a pretty vitriolic attack against a former Foreign Secretary. Is that really going to deliver any unity?
Yeah, you know what? I think I should be buying them both a drink this evening and get them to bond.
OK, can we film it?
But
you do?
We'll try. Yes, you can follow me. We'll see whether we do it on the terrace.
Okay.
Get a camera on Westminster Bridge.
I'll be there.
But to answer your question, look, I think we don't expect... It's midterm. I don't think we're expecting great election results from the by-elections. We'll see. The real hurdle, as you quite rightly say, is going to be the Privileges Committee inquiry, and they're going to report in the autumn. But until then, I don't see any action being taken.
Just finally, very quickly, if Boris Johnson in 2 years' time is ready to go to the country, but it looks like he is going to lose. The polls at the moment are negative for the Prime Minister, but obviously it's a long way to go.
Yeah, and they go up and down.
The Conservative Party should stick with him, even if he doesn't look like a winner. Will you stick with him?
Well, I mean, you talk about getting rid of him immediately before a general election.
Well, in the run-up to it.
Well, it would take 3 months to replace him, so you'd have to do it pretty...
That's why people are moving now, though, isn't it? They're trying to move now.
No, I don't think that's the reason, you know. I think the reason is all to do with policy. I think it's to do with the fact that many people didn't get jobs and were overlooked in the government, that other people did have jobs and were sacked. So you always get that in governments which have been in power for a few years. And there are others who are quite open about it, like Jesse Norman, saying, well, I don't agree with Channel 4 sell-off, I don't agree with the Rwanda policy. You know, the Conservative Party, like the Labour Party, is a very broad church, and I respect their views. Maybe not the ones who are upset because they were sacked, but, you know, the ones who have different political views. But we went in for a very, very democratic election yesterday, and we got a result. And and as I say, I think you are right to say autumn could be a difficult period. Let's see what happens with the Privileges Committee report.
OK, no doubt we'll be speaking again. Thank you very much indeed for coming down, Michael Fabricant. There, let us catch up with the weather. It is glorious here.